Rain was falling again. It always seemed to find him, no matter where he tried to hide. The cold drops slipped through cracks in the concrete above and fell straight onto his face, waking him before dawn. Marcus Hale opened his eyes to the dim light that crawled beneath the bridge, a gray, heavy glow that never changed. The world above was already awake, cars roaring past, but down here time moved differently, slower, meaner. He sat up, wrapped in a torn army jacket that had long lost its warmth. Around him, everything was damp: his blanket, the cardboard floor, the few plastic bags that held what was left of his life. An old photo, a lighter that didn't work, and a half-empty bottle of water. That was it. That was all that remained of a man who once ran into burning buildings for a living. Marcus rubbed his face, feeling the rough beard, the cold skin. He used to start his mornings with the sound of a siren, a heartbeat of duty. Now it was the distant hum of traffic and the soft hiss of rain hitting the river. He stood, stretched his back, and stepped out from under the arch of the bridge. Across the water, the city was waking. Coffee shops lighting up, commuters rushing, lights blinking on in tall windows. He watched it the way a ghost might watch the living. He didn't belong there anymore, not since the fire, not since they took everything. A few meters away, Troy was already awake, a scrawny man with missing teeth and a laugh that always sounded half-drunk, even when he wasn't. He was sitting by a small fire made from scrap wood, warming his hands over the flames. "Morning, soldier," Troy called out with a grin. "Heard the rain last night? Sounded like the whole damn sky was leaking." Marcus managed a small smile. "Yeah, I thought it'd wash the bridge away." "Nah," Troy chuckled, showing his cracked lips. "Nothing washes away easy down here." They shared a moment of silence, the kind only people who have lost too much can share, where words don't help, but presence still matters. Troy broke it first, rummaging through a plastic crate. "Found some cans last night," he said. "We can trade them later. Maybe get a sandwich or two." Marcus nodded. "I'll go check the recycling yard later." That meant walking 4 miles to the east side, where the city forgot about people like him. As he made his way along the riverbank, Marcus passed a couple sleeping under a tarp, a young man clutching a broken guitar, and a woman talking to herself. They all looked the same, hollow-eyed, worn thin, fading. He wondered if he looked like that too. He probably did. When he reached the edge of the bridge, he stopped and stared into the water below. The river was swollen from the rain, brown and restless. It always felt alive, like it was whispering to him, sometimes cruel, sometimes kind. He had almost drowned there once, years ago on a rescue call. A burning ferry, a family trapped inside. He'd pulled 2 people out before the deck collapsed beneath him. When he woke up in the hospital, he was a hero. 2 months later, they called him a murderer. Negligence, they said. Reckless conduct. The politicians needed someone to blame. They picked him. That was 8 years ago. 8 long years of silence, shelters, and hunger. He sighed, crouched by the river, and washed his hands in the icy water. His reflection stared back, the face of a stranger. The beard was too long, the eyes too tired. Yet deep inside, there was still something there, a flicker, a small spark that refused to die, even when everything else had burned away. Troy's voice carried over the rain. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Marcus didn't turn around. "Every day." "So why don't you—" He watched the current swirl around a floating branch. "Because the river always brings me back." The day went on quietly. He gathered cans, traded them for coins, bought a cup of coffee from a corner shop that didn't let him inside. The clerk handed it through the door like he was contagious. Marcus didn't argue. He'd learned long ago that dignity costs too much. When he returned to the bridge that evening, the city was glowing gold in the sunset. Troy was asleep, curled up by the embers of their small fire. Marcus sat down beside him, sipping what was left of the coffee, listening to the hum of cars overhead. It was strange. The bridge never slept. Even at night it breathed. The echo of engines above felt almost like waves crashing, steady and endless. He lay back, staring at the concrete ceiling, tracing the stains made by years of water. Some looked like faces, others like flames. He closed his eyes and whispered, half to himself, half to the river. Sometimes it takes what it wants, and sometimes it gives something back. He didn't know yet that tomorrow the river would take him and give him back something he thought he'd lost forever. The rain hadn't stopped all night. By morning, the river had grown thick and violent, slapping against the stone pillars beneath the bridge. The current moved like a living thing, angry, unpredictable. Marcus sat near the edge, hands tucked into his sleeves, watching debris swirl past a broken branch, a plastic bottle, an old shoe. He wasn't sure why he kept watching it every day. Maybe because it was the only thing in this city that never lied. The river always showed what it truly was, wild, untamed, dangerous, just like the world he used to fight fires in. He'd already done his morning round, collecting cans and bottles, trading them for a muffin that tasted like cardboard. Troy was still asleep under his blanket, coughing softly every now and then. The fire had gone out hours ago, leaving only the faint smell of burnt wood. Marcus stood up, stretched his back, and looked across the water. Fog rolled along the surface, thick and low, turning everything pale. It was quiet for once, until he heard it. A voice, a scream. At first he thought it was his imagination. The river sometimes sounded like it was crying when the wind hit it right. But then came another sound, a splash, sharp and heavy. And then, unmistakably, a woman's scream for help. Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran toward the edge, scanning the gray water, until he saw her. A figure thrashing near the middle of the river, her hand slapping against the surface before disappearing again. The current was dragging her fast toward the underpass. "Hold on!" he shouted, though she probably couldn't hear him. Without thinking, he pulled off his jacket and boots and dove in. The shock of cold hit him like a punch. The river wrapped around him, pulling him down, spinning him through mud and bubbles. He fought upward, gasping when he broke the surface, blinking through the rain. The woman was 50 feet away now, her movements weaker. He swam hard. His shoulders burned. His breath came in short bursts. Each stroke felt heavier, but he pushed on, years of muscle memory guiding him. The same rhythm he'd used in rescue drills long ago. When he reached her, she was half-conscious, her lips blue. He grabbed her under the arms, trying to keep her head above water. "I got you," he shouted. "Don't fight it." She didn't answer, just gasped weakly. The current slammed them against a concrete barrier, scraping his arm raw. He ignored it and kicked hard toward the shallow bank. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time twisted into noise, the roar of the river, his own ragged breath, her soft moans. Finally his knees hit mud. He dragged her out, collapsing beside her on the wet grass. She wasn't breathing right. He turned her on her side, pressed his ear to her chest. A heartbeat, faint, uneven. He started compressions, counting quietly, then gave her air. "Come on, breathe," he muttered between pushes. "You're not dying here, not today." Another push, another breath. Then she coughed, a violent choking sound that made her whole body jerk. River water poured from her mouth. She gasped for air, eyes wide and unfocused. "It's okay," he said softly, holding her shoulders still. "You're safe now." She blinked, looking around in confusion. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came. From the road above, Marcus heard car doors slamming. Someone shouted. Sirens in the distance. Police. Ambulance. He looked up to see two men in uniforms running toward them. When they reached the bank, they stopped abruptly, staring at him. A soaking, wet, dark-skinned man in torn clothes, kneeling over a pale, unconscious woman in an expensive coat. Their hands went to their radios instantly. "Step away from her," one of them barked. Marcus raised his hand slowly, the cold biting into his fingers. "I saved her," he said, voice hoarse. "She fell in." "Move back!" the officer shouted again, pulling the woman gently away from him. He did as told, backing off. The paramedics rushed in, surrounding her, shining flashlights, checking her pulse. Marcus stood there, dripping and shivering, watching them work. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she'd been near the river. When the ambulance doors finally closed, one of the officers turned to him. "You need to come with us." Marcus hesitated. He didn't have the strength to explain, and he could already see the suspicion in their eyes. They saw only a homeless man, not a rescuer, not a firefighter, just another stranger from under the bridge. He shook his head slowly. "You've got her. That's what matters." Before they could react, he turned and disappeared into the fog, moving down the embankment until their flashlights couldn't reach him. He walked barefoot through the cold mud until he reached the dark shadow of the bridge again. His body trembled, his clothes heavy with river water. He sat down beside the dying fire and stared at his hands, shaking, raw, covered in small cuts. Troy stirred beside him. "What the hell happened to you?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at the river instead. The fog had swallowed everything. Only the sound remained, steady, endless, alive. "Someone fell in," he finally said quietly. "I pulled her out." Troy blinked. You jumped in that damn river?" Marcus nodded. Troy gave a low whistle. "Man, you really ain't like the rest of us." Marcus almost smiled, but couldn't. He just looked at the water again, whispering the same words he had the night before. "Sometimes the river takes what it wants." Then, after a pause, "But not today." By the next morning, the city was buzzing. News anchors spoke of a mysterious homeless man who saved the mayor's daughter from drowning. No one knew his name, just that he vanished before the police could question him. Marcus heard the story on a small radio an old vendor kept near the bus stop. He froze when he heard the words, "Daughter of Mayor Richard Brooks." The name hit him like a blow. He didn't stay to listen. He turned away, walking back toward the bridge, every step heavier than the last. That name, Brooks. It wasn't just familiar. It was the name printed at the bottom of the letter that ended his life 8 years ago. The signature that stripped him of his badge, his job, his home. He sat beneath the bridge, staring at the water. The river moved lazily now, calm after the storm. Something glimmered on the ground near his foot. He reached down and picked it up, a small silver locket tangled in grass. Inside, behind a cracked glass window, was a photo of a young girl with long hair and a bright, careless smile. The initials LB were engraved on the back. Marcus closed his fist around it. He knew right away who it belonged to. Across town, in a hospital room wrapped in white, Lydia Brooks woke up. Her throat hurt, her head spun, but she was alive. The nurse told her she'd been pulled from the river by a man, a stranger who disappeared before anyone could thank him. Her father stood near the window, on the phone, speaking in that cold, practiced tone that never cracked. "Yes, we're offering a reward," he said. "Find him. I want to thank the man personally." But his eyes never left the skyline. The gratitude in his voice sounded rehearsed, forced, like a speech meant for cameras. Lydia could tell. She'd grown up watching her father turn emotion into strategy. Still, something inside her wouldn't rest. She wanted to see the man's face, the one who'd been there in the water when she was dying. That night, Marcus lit a small fire near the bridge and held the locket over the flame, watching how it caught the light. He could have sold it. Silver like that might get him a few meals, but he didn't. He just wrapped it in cloth and tucked it carefully inside his coat. Troy noticed. "What's that?" "Something the river gave back," Marcus said quietly. Troy chuckled. "You're starting to sound like a preacher, man." Marcus didn't reply. His gaze stayed on the water, calm and endless. He didn't know why he'd kept the locket. Maybe because, for the first time in years, saving someone made him feel like the man he used to be. But deep down, he also knew this city, and its mayor, had long memories. And if the river had given him something back, it was only a matter of time before it tried to take again. The rain had stopped, but Marcus's mind was stormy. Sitting under the bridge with the locket pressed to his chest, memories of the firehouse returned like a relentless tide. 8 years ago he had been Captain Marcus Hale of Engine 12, a man respected, trusted, someone who ran toward danger when others ran away. The day the fire took 2 lives was burned into him more clearly than any scar on his body. The call had come in the evening, a warehouse fire near the docks. The building was old, wooden beams rotting from years of neglect. Marcus and his team had arrived quickly, evacuating workers, barking orders, saving who they could. But then a beam collapsed. 2 people didn't make it out. The investigation was swift. Marcus believed in transparency, in owning mistakes if they happened. But politics doesn't work that way. Mayor Brooks, then a rising politician, ensured Marcus became the scapegoat. Negligence, they said. Reckless conduct. Marcus's badge was stripped, his pension denied. His wife left with their daughter, unable to watch her husband's name destroyed in the newspapers. The city cheered for the sacrifice of someone else's career while blaming him for what was never his fault. He remembered the firehouse now silent, the smell of charred wood lingering, the empty lockers of men who had moved on or retired. Each echo of laughter, each clatter of boots haunted him. He had gone from hero to nothing in months. Under the bridge, he pressed the locket into his hand, feeling the cold metal against his palm. L.B., the girl he'd saved yesterday, was the daughter of the man who had ruined his life. The irony was bitter, almost cruel. Troy stirred beside him, rubbing his eyes. "Man, you're quiet today." "I'm thinking," Marcus said, staring at the water, "about how a single day can take everything from you, and another day can throw something back." Troy grunted. "You mean like that girl?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah, like that girl." The river had returned a reminder that even broken lives sometimes intersect in strange, impossible ways. But it also reminded him of the weight he carried. He had no home, no family, no safety net. He was a ghost. The night crept in. Lights from the bridge flickered, reflecting on the water, shadows dancing across the concrete walls. Marcus thought of the firehouse, of the team that had trusted him, and of the river that had taken 2 lives long ago. He had been drowning in guilt before, even when he wore a badge. Now, he was drowning in survival. But saving Lydia had brought something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. A purpose that might one day demand reckoning. With her, with her father, and maybe with himself. A week had passed since the rescue. Marcus kept to his routine, scavenging cans, checking the river, avoiding the few people who glanced at him with curiosity rather than sympathy. The locket stayed tucked inside his jacket, a small weight against his chest, a reminder of what had happened. Meanwhile, Lydia Brooks couldn't stop thinking about the man who saved her. She had returned home from the hospital bruised and shaken, but alive. Her father was already orchestrating news coverage, promising a reward, framing it as a PR opportunity. She saw the cold calculation behind his words and felt a strange anger rise in her chest. She had to see him. Using her connections, she sent volunteers and social workers into the neighborhoods near the river. She asked questions, showed the locket, searched every shelter and underpass. Every day she returned with nothing. The city was full of people who could have been him, but none of them were. Marcus noticed the subtle changes around the bridge. Volunteers occasionally wandered near the riverbank, scribbling notes, asking Troy questions he didn't answer. Marcus kept his distance, observing without engaging. He had learned long ago that help often came with strings, and he didn't trust strings anymore. One afternoon he spotted her before she saw him, a woman with a determined gait, gloves gripping a notebook, scanning the area with intent. Her hair was damp from the rain, her coat expensive, yet she moved with a kind of urgency that made him pause. She had found him. He didn't run. Instead, he crouched behind a pillar, watching. His instincts told him to disappear, but something in her posture reminded him of someone he once knew, someone unafraid, unshaken, determined to confront the truth. Finally, she called out, "Sir, are you the man who saved me?" Marcus hesitated. Years of survival had taught him caution. "I don't want trouble," he said, his voice low, gravelly from the river and lack of sleep. She stepped closer. "I don't want trouble either. I need to know who you are. I want to thank you properly." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Her eyes were earnest, untouched by the cynicism of her father's world, and yet the name Brooks lingered in his memory like a warning. "I saved you," he said finally. "That's enough." She shook her head. "It's not. You risked yourself for me. I need to know why." He shrugged, staring at the water again. "Because that's what I used to do." Her gaze softened, but there was a tension there too, as if she sensed the storm in him, the past, the betrayal, the years of survival on the edge. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt exposed, not by danger, but by the presence of someone who didn't see him as invisible. And Lydia, for all her privilege and protection, saw more than she expected. She saw the cracks, the grief, the endurance. They didn't speak much after that. She left a small bag of food on the bank, a silent gesture. He accepted it, barely nodding. But deep down, Marcus knew this encounter wasn't over. Something had shifted. A reckoning was coming, whether he wanted it or not. The river, calm now, whispered along the banks, and Marcus listened, knowing that it had plans for both of them. It was a gray afternoon when Lydia returned, this time without volunteers or cameras. She walked along the riverbank alone, boots sinking slightly in the mud, eyes scanning every shadow beneath the bridge. Marcus saw her before she saw him, crouched behind the pillar where he always watched the water. She stopped a few feet away, hesitating, notebook in hand. "I wanted to see you, in person," she said softly. Marcus didn't move. He'd faced fire, collapse, and betrayal, but looking at her now, he felt the strange unease of someone unaccustomed to being trusted. "You don't know me," he said. "I know enough," she replied. "You saved my life." He shook his head, eyes cold. "I saved you. That's all there is." She stepped closer, but carefully, as if aware that this man could vanish at any second. "Why did you do it?" Marcus stared at the water, thinking of the firehouse, of the river, of the years of quiet suffering. "Because that's what I used to do. I can't explain more than that." Her eyes softened. There was something about him, a quiet strength beneath the grime, the exhaustion, the rage, something noble. She extended her hand with the locket. "This is yours now. You left it behind." He looked down, then back at her. Slowly, deliberately, he shook his head. "I don't need anything from her, or from you." "From me," she said, confused. "It's just a gift, a thank you, for saving me." Marcus's gaze fell to the locket. He remembered the first time he held it, the delicate silver and the smiling face inside. It was heavy in his hand, not for its weight, but for the truth it carried. He pressed it back into his jacket pocket. "The river gave me enough," he said quietly. She stepped back, uncertain. I needed to see you, to know that you're real, that someone like you exists in a world that ignores us." He considered this, then nodded once. "I'm real," he said, "and the world, it doesn't care." For a moment, they simply stood there, the river rushing between them and the city beyond. Two lives briefly intersecting, separated by years of pain and misunderstanding. Finally, Lydia turned to leave. Marcus watched her walk away, knowing that this meeting was only the beginning. He didn't yet know how much of his past would collide with her present, or how her father's shadow would follow them both. As she disappeared into the foggy streets, Marcus returned to the fire, picking up Troy's sleeping form. He sat back, staring at the dark water, whispering to himself, "Some things we can't fix. Some things we can only endure." And somewhere deep in the river's pulse, Marcus felt the first hint of a reckoning yet to come. Back at the Brooks residence, Lydia couldn't stop thinking about the man under the bridge. She couldn't shake the image of him, soaked, exhausted, yet calm, holding her like he had held her life in his hands. Curiosity gnawed at her. She wanted to understand him, and she knew she had the means to do it. She began digging through old news archives, public records, and personnel files. She searched for accidents, firehouse incidents, anything involving a Marcus Hale. It didn't take long. A headline from 8 years ago caught her eye. Firehouse scandal: Captain Marcus Hale blamed for fatal warehouse fire. The article detailed a night of tragedy, a fire at a downtown warehouse, 2 lives lost, and the investigation that followed. The city's report was damning negligence, reckless conduct, termination. Her stomach turned. She read further, tracing signatures, dates, and official correspondence. And there it was, Mayor Richard Brooks. Not yet mayor, but a politician climbing the ranks, had signed off on the internal report that condemned Marcus. The words on the paper were stark, cold, and unforgiving. Lydia's fingers trembled. "He's the man," she whispered. The realization hit her like a punch. The man who saved her was the same man her father had destroyed. Her father's voice echoed from the hallway, sharp and rehearsed. "Lydia, remember, this story is about gratitude. Keep it simple. Reward, public acknowledgement, that's all." She shook her head, feeling a surge of anger. Gratitude, reward. He had taken everything from Marcus, a life, a family, dignity, and now she was supposed to follow the script. She didn't want to follow the script. Lydia left the house that evening, carrying a small bag with essentials. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She needed to see him again, not as the daughter of the mayor, not as a rescued girl, but as someone seeking the truth. She returned to the riverbank, the city lights reflecting in the water. There he was, crouched beside the dying fire, the locket safely in his coat. His eyes met hers briefly, guarded yet curious. "I know," she said simply. Marcus tilted his head. "Know what?" That my father. He ruined your life, the fire, the report, everything." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He stared at the water, at the current that had taken so much from him, at the city that had forgotten him. "I already knew," he said finally. Her voice softened. "I wanted to tell you myself. I wanted you to hear it from someone who cares." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the earnestness, the discomfort, the guilt. She wasn't the enemy. She was the bridge, fragile and trembling, between the life he had lost and the life he had saved. For the first time, Marcus felt something shift. Not relief, not forgiveness, not yet. But a flicker, the faintest hint that perhaps some debts could be acknowledged, even if they could never be fully repaid. Winter arrived early that year, harsh and unrelenting. The river's edge froze over in jagged shards, and the wind cut through the bridge like a knife. Marcus had learned to move quietly, to bundle himself in layers that did little to block the cold. Troy wasn't so lucky. The other man had been coughing for days, and Marcus watched helplessly as the thin frame of his friend shivered under a tattered blanket. "You need to eat more," Marcus said one morning, handing him a stale sandwich he had scavenged. "I eat enough," Troy muttered, voice weak. "I'm fine." But Marcus knew better. He'd been on the streets too long to be fooled by bravado. Winter here wasn't just cold, it was merciless. One night, after a storm had blown through, Marcus woke to silence. Troy's small fire had burned down to embers, and his friend wasn't breathing. Panic surged, then gave way to quiet resignation. He had been waiting for this, perhaps even welcoming it. Marcus dug a shallow grave in the frozen mud behind the bridge, his hands raw and bleeding from the effort. He wrapped Troy in a threadbare blanket and laid him to rest without ceremony, without words. Just a nod, a final gesture to a life that had never had much. Days passed. The city moved on, oblivious. The river flowed cold and steady. Marcus returned to his routine, numb and quiet, carrying the weight of yet another loss. Then, one evening, Lydia appeared again. She had been searching, questioning, trying to understand the man who had saved her. She found Marcus sitting by the dying embers of the fire, silent and withdrawn. "Marcus," she said softly, stepping into the faint glow, "I know the truth. About my father. About you." He didn't look at her. "I already knew," he murmured, voice rough. She knelt beside him. "I can't imagine what you've gone through, what he did to you." Marcus finally turned, eyes meeting hers. Grief, fatigue, and anger were written on his face. "You don't understand," he said. "This isn't just about him. It's about every day I've had to survive since, every night on this riverbank, every face I've seen disappear." She reached out, gently placing a hand near his. "I can't change the past, but maybe we can do something now, together." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He thought of Troy, of the firehouse, of the river, and of the locket still tucked close to his chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to turn all that pain into something meaningful. The night settled around them, cold and silent, the river murmuring its endless song. Marcus whispered to himself, more to the wind than to her, "Some things you survive, some things you can't, and some you just endure." Lydia didn't move. She understood. And for the first time, Marcus felt that the bridge, the river, and the city itself weren't entirely against him. But he also knew the reckoning with her father, and with the past, had only just begun. The following week, Lydia made her move. She confronted her father in his office, a room filled with dark wood and the cold gleam of power. Mayor Richard Brooks looked up from his papers, feigning surprise. "Lydia, what is this about?" he asked, voice smooth but sharp. "I know," she said simply, stepping forward. "About Marcus Hale, about what you did to him." Brooks's expression tightened. "Careful, Lydia. You don't understand the politics of—" "I understand enough," she interrupted. "He didn't deserve it. You ruined his life, and now you're trying to spin it like a PR opportunity because he saved me." The mayor leaned back, calculating. "You're emotional. That's understandable. But you must see, he's a hero now. You owe him gratitude, yes. Reward, recognition." "I don't care about reward," Lydia shot back. "I care about the truth. I want him safe. I want him recognized for what he is, not for what you allow people to think." Brooks's jaw tightened. "You can't just change things. The past is settled." "Then I'll settle it myself," she said, her tone quiet but sharp, like steel hidden beneath silk. "I'll find him, and I'll make sure he knows I'm on his side, not yours." For a moment, silence filled the office. Brooks's hand hovered over a stack of papers, his mind racing. He realized that Lydia's will was stronger than any PR campaign, any reward he could offer. She had chosen a path of integrity, and it was aimed straight at him. Meanwhile, Marcus remained unaware of the confrontation above. He continued his routines under the bridge, the locket still tucked safely in his coat. But he sensed the change in the air, a shift that whispered of approaching reckoning. The next evening, Lydia returned to the riverbank. She found him sitting quietly beside the small, fading fire, the cold wind cutting through his damp clothes. "Marcus," she said softly. He looked up, startled but not afraid. "I didn't expect you," he muttered. "I had to," she replied. "I spoke to my father. He won't stop now, and I want to make sure you're safe before things get complicated." Marcus studied her, the city lights reflecting off the water, revealing a mixture of determination and fear in her eyes. For the first time in years, he felt that someone truly understood the depth of his past, the magnitude of his survival. "You're brave," he said quietly. "Most people, they just look and walk away." "I had no choice," she said, kneeling beside him. "You saved my life. That changes everything." Marcus leaned back, eyes on the dark river. "Maybe it does," he murmured. Or maybe it's just the beginning. The river flowed endlessly, the wind whispering through the bridge's arches. And in that quiet, two lives, bound by tragedy and survival, began a tentative alliance, fragile, uncertain, but real. The days after the confrontation felt strange. Marcus and Lydia met quietly, away from the bustling city, in the shadow of the bridge. Neither trusted the world above. Both had learned that appearances could be deceiving. Lydia spoke first. "I can help you, Marcus. I have resources, connections, even my father's influence, if we can use it carefully." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want help from him or his world. I've survived without it this long." She leaned closer, eyes earnest. "Not his help, mine. You saved me, and now I want to make it right, at least a little." He studied her for a long moment. She was young, yes, privileged, but there was grit in her voice, a determination he hadn't seen in anyone who called themselves civilized. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, but this is quiet. No one knows. No one can know." They began planning. Lydia used her access to city records to uncover more about the events that had destroyed Marcus's life. Old memos, police reports, internal investigations that had been buried or falsified. Marcus, in turn, shared his memories of the firehouse, the mistakes that weren't his, and the faces of colleagues long gone. Together, they pieced together a story that could expose the lies that had been fed to the public while also protecting Marcus from further legal or political retaliation. Each document Lydia found, each witness she contacted, felt like a small victory, proof that the river of truth, no matter how slow, could eventually reach the sea. One evening, while Marcus was mending Troy's old blanket by the fire, Lydia handed him a folder. "Everything we've got so far. Take a look." He opened it, scanning the faded pages and official letters. His hand trembled as he recognized the signatures, the decisions, the cold bureaucracy that had dictated his fate. This could ruin him," he murmured. "I don't want to ruin anyone," Lydia said quietly. "I just want the truth to be seen, and for you to get the life you deserve." Marcus looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight, the river, and years of unsaid words. "I don't know if I can go back," he admitted. "You don't have to," she replied. "You just have to step forward, even a little. That's enough." For the first time, Marcus allowed himself to feel something more than survival, a flicker of hope, fragile and bright. It was small, like the fire burning before them, but it was enough to warm the cold spaces inside him. The river whispered nearby, relentless and eternal. And beneath the bridge, two lives, one born of privilege, one forged in loss, began to form a plan that might finally bring justice, or at least acknowledgement, to a man who had been forgotten for too long. The day finally came. Marcus and Lydia approached it cautiously, each step heavy with tension. The mayor's office loomed like a fortress, dark glass reflecting the city around it. Marcus had avoided these halls for years, but now he walked in with purpose, Lydia at his side. Brooks looked up from his desk, eyes narrowing. "Marcus Hale," he said, his tone a mix of recognition and irritation. "I thought you'd disappeared for good." "I never disappeared," Marcus replied evenly. "I survived. And I remember everything." The mayor's lips pressed into a thin line. "You should be grateful. Your actions yesterday saved my daughter. Don't make this about the past." "It is about the past," Marcus said, voice rising. "You destroyed my life, my career, my family. You blame me for a fire that wasn't my fault, and you did it to climb higher. And now you expect gratitude." Lydia stepped forward, holding the folder of documents. "These are the records, the memos, the reports. Everything you tried to bury. Marcus deserves the truth to be seen." Brooks's expression shifted from irritation to panic. He scanned the papers, the evidence undeniable. His political armor faltered. This isn't the full story," he said, voice tight. "Full story or not," Marcus interrupted, I've lived it. I've endured it. And the city knows the truth now. Not because of your PR, not because of your power, but because I survived and someone cared enough to help me." The room was silent, the tension thick, oppressive. Marcus felt years of anger and pain pressing into him, yet there was a calm beneath it now, a quiet strength forged by the river, by Troy, by the nights under the bridge. Lydia spoke softly but firmly. "Father, this isn't about revenge. It's about acknowledging the wrongs done and allowing Marcus to reclaim a life he lost unfairly. You can't erase what you did, but you can at least recognize it." Brooks stared at her, conflicted, the weight of his own ambition pressing down. He opened his mouth, then closed it, swallowing hard. Finally, he nodded. "Marcus, I can't undo the past, but I acknowledge it, and I'm sorry." Marcus didn't respond immediately. The apology was not enough to heal all the scars, but it was a start. A small crack in the wall that had trapped him in anger for so long. Lydia placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's enough to begin." Marcus looked at her, then at the mayor. The fire inside him, anger, grief, betrayal, burned less fiercely now. For the first time in years, he felt the possibility of closure. The river outside the city continued its endless flow, a reminder that life moves forward, carrying both destruction and renewal. And for Marcus Hale, the man who had survived loss, betrayal, and the harsh streets, that current finally felt like it was moving towards something more than mere survival. He straightened, taking a deep breath, letting the tension leave him. The reckoning was over. The truth had been laid bare. And though scars remained, Marcus finally felt the faintest hint of peace. The days after the confrontation were quiet, almost surreal. Marcus returned to the bridge one last time, the river flowing beneath it, as if nothing had changed. The city above continued its endless hum, oblivious to the quiet victories and losses that had unfolded below. Lydia had kept her promise. She made sure the story of Marcus Hale reached the public, not as a sensational headline, not as a fleeting hero tale, but as the truth a man wronged by power, surviving against all odds, saving a life while carrying his own pain like a shadow. Marcus didn't seek recognition. He didn't crave applause. The locket, still tucked safely in his coat, reminded him that gratitude often came quietly, in gestures rather than headlines. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel it. He visited Troy's grave one chilly morning, the frost glittering on the thin layer of soil. He knelt, tracing the outline of the small, shallow grave. "I miss you, brother," he whispered. "You taught me more about survival than anyone ever could." He placed a small stone, a symbol of remembrance, and stood, the cold air biting at his face. Lydia appeared beside him, hands tucked into her coat pockets. She didn't speak immediately, letting the silence settle between them. Finally, she said softly, "He wouldn't want you to carry it all alone anymore." Marcus nodded. "I know. That's why I think I'm ready. Ready to move forward, not just survive, but live." They walked back toward the city together, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two people bound by circumstance, respect, and the unspoken understanding of loss. Marcus found a small room in a modest building, the rent affordable but stable. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The first real beginning he'd had in 8 years. He decorated it sparsely, keeping only the essentials: a bed, a table, a chair, and the locket on a shelf, catching the morning light. Lydia visited often, bringing small meals, conversation, even newspapers with the article she had written. But more than that, she brought a bridge back to the world Marcus had once been forced to leave behind, one that was kind, attentive, and genuine. One evening they walked along the riverbank, now calm and reflective, under the soft glow of streetlights. Marcus paused, watching the water. "The river, it still scares me sometimes, but it also reminds me that life moves forward, no matter what we've lost." Lydia smiled. And sometimes it brings back what we need most, not just people, but hope. Marcus looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips for the first time in years. The scars of the past remained, visible and raw, but they no longer defined him. He had survived, endured, and ultimately reclaimed a part of his life that had seemed forever lost. The city hummed around them, cars passed, lights flickered, people moved about their lives. And beneath it all, the river continued its endless journey, carrying the weight of sorrow, survival, and renewal. Marcus Hale, once broken, once forgotten, finally felt the quiet strength of a man who had been tested and had endured. He was free, free to live, free to remember, and free to hope. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain, the loss, and the river's eternal current, Marcus smiled.